It's time to enhance the relationship between expertise and impact, between knowledge and application. Welcome to a journey of discovery and empowerment. Welcome to All Physicians Lead, the Forbes Books podcast that highlights the critical leadership role that all practicing physicians take on every day. Here's Dr. Leon Morse.
Dr. Dean Taylor has built his career around one mission, developing better physician leaders. He's an orthopedic surgery professor at Duke University, a former U.S. Army colonel, and the founder of the Healthcare Leadership Foundation. He also developed and leads the Feagin Leadership Program at Duke, a model focused on emotional intelligence, teamwork, service, integrity, and critical thinking. His work centers on a simple idea: when physicians lead well, healthcare gets better. Dr. Dean Taylor, welcome to the All Physicians Lead podcast.
Leon, it's great to be here. I'm really excited for the discussion that we're about to have.
Well, it's funny. I think you've probably heard, but some people will say that the definition of genius is a degree to which somebody agrees with you. And, looking at all the work you've done, I think this is going to be a fun talk where the great minds think alike corollary comes into play. But by definition, logically, that also means that so minds think alike too. So nobody's going to fit what two surgeons throw together here today. We'll see how it goes. But thanks again and welcome.
It's we've been living in parallel universes, and I'm finding more and more people that are living in those universes. And I look forward to talking about how we can bring all those people together to really push this idea that all physicians lead and emphasize that responsibility and emphasize the need to teach the skills so that we can lead well.
Yeah, very true. Very teachable. We know that. We'll talk about our backgrounds here in a bit for those who don't know. And that's a softball question from the beginning is tell us a little bit about how you ended up at the academy. When did you decide you wanted to be a doctor? What were your training and educational paths that brought you to where you are today?
Well, it's a long story. I'll try and give you the
We got an hour.
abbreviated version. I grew up in a middle-class family in Michigan and was pretty naive about things growing up. I thought when I was looking at colleges that I'd look at MIT, which to me was Michigan Tech. And if it hadn't been for a high school counselor named Murray Lake, I probably would have ended up at a state school or a community college in Michigan, as I was the oldest of four kids that were born within 5 years. Our family didn't have the means for higher education costs and some of the things that went along with going to college. As it turns out, Mr. Lake saw something in me and thought that I might be good for one of the military academies. And he suggested I check out West Point, and I was fortunate enough to be accepted. And that started a lifelong education into leadership development. That's been very interesting along the way. Leon, you were class of 84 from West Point.
Yeah, so you probably hollered at me a few times while
I
we
was
were
going to say,
there,
do you remember me hazing you? Because I was a class of 81.
I think I blanked all those episodes out and only remember the beauty of the Hudson in the spring, at this point. So I don't know about you, but everything's a fond memory these days.
Well, I can detect the sarcasm in your voice because having been a cadet in those days, it was not easy. It was not fun. And every day I was looking for a reason to leave. And
great training for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I figured I'd last for 2 years and then transfer and transfer those credits and go somewhere else. But the opportunities just were too good to pass up. As I was looking for a career after West Point, it became known to me that you could go to medical school right afterwards. Our class was the second class that could go directly from West Point to medical school. And I had a mentor who was, I think, also one of your mentors, Walt Curl, who was the orthopedic surgeon at the time, our team physician. I was a hockey player. And he sat me down for an interview in the clinic one day. Unbeknownst to me, it was an interview for Duke Med School, and I was accepted to Duke Med School, and ultimately ended up there. And um, it was for me, it was from going from one institution committed to developing leaders in the profession and the military profession to another institution dedicated to developing leaders in whatever profession you're in, whether it was business or medicine or law or divinity. And I still feel that way. Although maybe it's not as intentionally communicated that way at Duke. I think people come to Duke to be leaders in whatever profession they're in. And along the way, after graduating from med school and training in the military and coming back to Duke for orthopedic residency, and then having a long career in the military in orthopedic sports medicine. The last 10 years as team physician at West Point and chief of orthopedics. I came back to Duke in 2006 after I retired from the Army. And I came back really with two jobs. One was to take care of the Duke basketball team as their team physician. We had a coach that I'd known from the time when I was a cadet, and he was our coach at West Point, and that was Mike Krzyzewski.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he called me up and as part of the recruitment said, we'd like you to come back and take care of the basketball team. I said, that's great. The second job was to run the sports medicine fellowship and be the fellowship director at Duke for orthopedic surgeons that were interested in additional training to learn the fine points of taking care of athletes and active people. And that was a job that I really wanted to embrace and figure out how we could do it better than anybody else. I just read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great.
Yeah.
And the hedgehog principle about
Great book.
figure out what you can do better than anybody else and then doggedly stick to it was something that was in my mind. And at that moment, I said, well, we're at Duke. I'm working with one of the great, I would say, great leaders of our era, and Mike Krzyzewski. We have a leadership curriculum at the business school, at the School for Public Policy, the Divinity School. And with my experience in the Army and West Point, I figured this could be something that we could do better than anybody else. And that was introduce intentionally leadership education into our fellowship. And that one idea 20 years ago has evolved into multiple impactful programs at Duke and elsewhere across the country and internationally that I've been fortunate to be a part of. And I would say the one thing that I know now that I didn't know 20 years ago was I didn't know very much about leadership then. I thought I did, but I'll qualify that. I didn't know much about healthcare leadership then, and I certainly know a lot more about it now, and I continue to learn about it every day because it's a different beast, as you know, Leon. Healthcare leadership is a different beast, and I in your book you talk about leadership is the ability to influence. And that's the definition that we use in all our programs is that healthcare leadership is the ability to influence others for the benefit of patients and patient populations. And that's what we need to emphasize. And with that definition, when we are teaching leadership skills and emphasizing the importance of that, everyone, as you say, all physicians lead. And if we give them the skills to lead better, we make healthcare better. And even extending beyond that, when we're working with medical students, they're leaders because they can influence their environments and others for the benefit of patients and patient populations. So everybody in healthcare has that leadership responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting. You talked about parallel universes, and I was growing up in Connecticut. I read The Making of a Surgeon in fifth grade and said, I'm going to be a doctor. And so had all my applications into, Yale and Wesleyan and Harvard and Hopkins and all the East Coast usual players. And a guidance counselor, Bob Gilligan, said, hey, you're captain of this and president of that. Why don't you go to West Point? And I said, I want to go to college. I don't want to join the Army. I had no idea, 2 hours away from West Point. And he threw me a catalog. I read it. I visited. I fell in love and, stayed on that path for a long, 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 long time. But the random things that happen that you just don't know are going to have such a great impact. But that guidance counselor story stuck with me.
Absolutely.
And, you talked about all physicians lead, and the cool thing in business for over a decade now is you shrink your title down to its initials, right? So Procter and Gamble becomes P&G and Ernst and Young becomes EY. Well, all physicians lead becomes APL. And what I tell folks is that, yes, all physicians lead, but we're not the only ones taking care of patients. So really all providers lead, right? But it's not just providers that are influencing people and helping take care of patients. It's all professionals lead. But you don't even have to be a professional. If you're just human, you're influencing behavior, whether you're aware of it or not, every day. So all people lead. And the things that that and you teach, and that your folks in all those programs are benefiting from, transfer across domains. And the really cool thing about learning the fundamental theory and practice of leadership and trying to improve it over time is you become a better human. You're a better dog owner, you're a better parent, you're a better spouse, you're a better community member, you're better at your church, you're better at work, all around. That follows you everywhere you go. How you, back in the day, move, shoot, and communicate. But today, how you lead, how you influence everybody around you, whether you're conscious of it or not. And that's part of the big shtick with the book, is the why physicians in particular should be aware of the impact that they have, aware of the influence that they have, and continuously strive to do that better.
That you take the words right out of my mouth, really. I mean, we could complete each other's sentences,
I think
and
so.
I love all people lead, uh, because it's true. We all
Mhm.
can influence others for the benefit of whatever mission or whatever objective we're trying to get to, and um, that's the key. That our fellow humans. Do you know who Augustus White is? Gus White.
I don't think I met.
Gus White is he's one of my heroes. He is grew up in the Mississippi Delta, Memphis, uh, um, African American, and is now a emeritus professor of orthopedic surgery at Harvard. And he has written a couple books, one called Seeing Patients, about disparities of healthcare and uh, getting to more equality in our care. Uh, but when he speaks, he says, "Welcome, fellow humans."
Nice.
He levels the playing field for everybody in the audience because we're all fellow humans. And
Yeah.
one my executive director, Joe Doty, who's also a West Point grad, he's the executive director for the Feagin Leadership Program. And he's not a physician, but he has his doctorate in education with emphasis on leadership education.
Mm. Nice.
He he his title is fellow human. Joe
I
Doty,
saw that on the website. Yeah.
FH, and it comes from Gus White, and in these small world things, Gus White and John Feagin served together in Vietnam. And Gus White talks about that and how John Feagin was the exemplar of not just physician leadership, but people leadership in caring for Gus and others, and share some stories that are really powerful. So I'd recommend seeing
Yeah,
patients
I'll have to
to
check that out.
anyone.
Is he still actively teaching,
He
lecturing?
he's
You said emeritus.
slowed down a bit,
Mhm.
but he is still actively involved and the Augustus White Institute for Health Equity is a nonprofit that's been started in Boston by many people. He's involved with that. And he has been to the Fagan Leadership Forum, which we just had April 30th, May 1st, our 17th Fagan Leadership Forum. And having both John Fagan when he was alive and Gus White there was
Wow, super powerful.
powerful,
Yeah.
powerful.
Uh,
And the stories that they could tell and the leadership lessons that they shared. And as you talk about, we have a lot to share with other professions, other disciplines, but we can also learn from other disciplines. And that's been the one of the tenets of the Fagan Leadership Forum, is bringing together leaders from athletics, like Coach K, who speaks every year, like uh, from academia, like the president of Duke University, Vince Price, and from business, another West Point grad who has been to the forum and spoken several times is Alex Gorski, West
Oh
Point
yeah.
class of '82,
Yeah, yeah.
former CEO of Johnson and Johnson, and from the military. This past um, forum that we just concluded was so impactful on examining the theme of leading with humanity in the age of artificial intelligence. And so, and very timely, with insights from the military with former Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, Dan Allen, Daryl Williams, class of '83, and Ed Cardone, who's a brilliant uh, um, technological genius in understanding how all of the artificial intelligence works. And Dan and Daryl understand how it affects humanity. And so we learn from them and how to do that better with our world in healthcare. And having 2 4 stars and a 3 star is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, connecting the dots. Ed and I were at the ethics forum up at West Point in the most recent iteration, and my brother, younger brother, who's Ranger Hall of Fame, Silver Star, Mogadishu kid, and Dan Allen's careers have done this throughout. And so I was texting my brother, going, "Hey, look who's on the senior advisory committee for the gentleman I'm talking to today." So,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
it's those parallel universes again, and
indeed,
just like
indeed.
you have the uh, APL, we have the FLP, the Fagan Leadership Program, and now since last July, to scale what we're doing and to scale what you're doing and bring together all these parallel universes, we started the nonprofit corporation, the Healthcare Leadership Foundation,
Saw that.
HLF.
Yep.
And the idea is to take this concept that all physicians lead. Let's collaboratively figure out how we can emphasize that concept that everyone in healthcare has that responsibility. And let's collaboratively figure out how we can teach the skills so that everyone can fulfill that responsibility better. And HLF, we're in our infancy in starting. The vision is, you know, in a couple years, we're going to be influencing in partnership with you. You're on the bus if you don't already know it, Leon.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well,
I
And,
was
and
I was
everyone
gonna
else,
ask to be invited if you didn't offer, so
yes, and everyone else, we're gonna come together. We're gonna change this because we cannot continue to teach as we taught in the early 1900s. In the Flexner report from the early 1900s is still the way we do medical education.
Yeah.
We have to teach to provide the care that can keep up with the complexity and the constantly changing world that we see in healthcare in the 21st century, the second quarter of the 21st century. We're not
That's right.
there, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there, and we're all going to do it together. So, thanks for being on the bus.
Thank you for inviting. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I've said my goal over the next 20 years is to get some form of leadership education in as many medical schools, residencies, and fellowship programs as possible. So this is a great collaboration opportunity. The book title itself, I'm very careful when I get in front of particularly mixed professional audiences that this is not just saying that physicians are always the boss or that they're the only leader everybody does. I write about doctors because I am one and I can say uncomfortable things about them and get away with it. And as physicians, again, not to think that we're all that, because we're a member of a team and a team environment is appropriate here to get the best information to make the best decisions, as you well know. But there's a psychological difference with the doc on a healthcare team. They call them doctor's orders, not doctor's suggestions, for a reason, right? And that you have to recognize that not because you're special, but rather because that's a barrier to open communication. So you have to very intentionally make sure that you do want to hear everybody's voice on that team, because folks are often reluctant to challenge the physician. So all those nuances that if you're not thinking about it, if you're not paying attention, if you're not reflecting on how you're leading with the intent to improve, then you're static and you're not doing the best job possible for the best decisions to take best care of your patients.
Yeah, how do you think about that from a framework standpoint of learning the skills to be able to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll often say I'm agnostic. You mentioned earlier that learning from other disciplines is great. I start by saying, first of all, I don't care what you read, but read something about leadership. Start learning this language, start learning these tools. And I'll recommend, Goldman and Maxwell and whoever else as a starting point. But for instance, so I'm a neurosurgeon, we know this. My default leadership style, Goldman's categories, is pace setting. I'm going this way, follow me mode. And that's great at 10 o'clock at night with a 4-year-old girl who just got run over by a car and everybody needs to move. Not so great in clinic the next day, and not even possible in the boardroom the next afternoon. But if you don't recognize how you're leading, what your default style is, if you're not self-aware, then you can't self-manage and you can't optimize without at least some fundamental knowledge of what these different styles are and then where do you optimally utilize them and
Yeah.
why.
Right.
And then as you're doing that, you're like, okay, that didn't work. Let me think about this uncomfortable interaction and how I can do better next time. All of those things just need to become rote.
Yep.
The teachable moments at the scrub sink where we're talking about the potential for blood loss and what do we do if we get this part of the tumor and we can't get it all off the brainstem. And oh, by the way, in the last case, you did a really good job when the tech dropped that instrument. Everyone was really flustered and, chief resident, you just said, hey, don't worry about it. We can use this one. No problem. And really calmed everybody down. Really good leadership there, really good communication skills. Nice job. That's where I want to become just part of the routine conversation as we are continuing to influence people to achieve desired results.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you talk about self-awareness, self-management. One of the things when we started doing this, and creating teaching programs, where we're teaching leadership skills, we kind of leaned on the business world because they have tons of models,
Yeah.
educational models, and we found that it was lacking. It was helpful, but it wasn't quite there. The feedback we would get from the students, the residents, the physicians, it wasn't quite there. So we did the research to see if there were any specific for healthcare, published on this. We found one that was from the British healthcare system. It's kind of complicated, not really applicable for what
Some of
we
the
were
NHS
trying to
stuff.
do.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
more
so,
focused on becoming an executive as a
right,
doc, right? Which is
right,
I tell folks to hold that, but if you Google physician leadership, you'll get 180,000 hits in point 0.8 seconds. You go to Amazon, you'll get 1,100 books, and almost uniformly focused on that mid-career doc who's now becoming a medical director or chief or a chair and now needs to learn how to lead. Well, we're missing out. So
right.
that's
Oh,
where you're going. I'm
right,
confident.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so what are the core principles? What are the competencies that you need to lead effectively in healthcare? So, our Feagin Scholars teams did some research on that, and we published on that, and it led to I don't know if your audience that's watching can see this, but I'll
Yeah, yeah,
show
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
It's
those
it's
5.
it's it's the mirror image, but you talk about self-awareness and self-management, and there's a reason of the 5 competencies, of integrity and selfless service and critical thinking and teamwork and emotional intelligence, that emotional intelligence is at the top and
Yeah,
it's the keystone. And 20 years ago, I
absolutely.
knew there was a thing called emotional intelligence. If you asked me to give a definition, then I could not have. I'm an orthopedic surgeon. To me, it's really a 2 by 2 matrix. It's about you and others, and it's about awareness and behaviors. So, self awareness, self management, social awareness, which includes empathy, and relationship management.
Yeah.
And that's what we teach in teaching that self-awareness is a foundational skill in building on it continuously, like you talked about. That is something that every physician should be doing, and it should be reinforced throughout every level, UME,
Yeah.
GME, CME, experiential, uh, everything, um, because that's how we're gonna get to more patient-centered care, which is the core principle of effective leadership in healthcare is patient-centeredness.
That's right. It all comes back to the patient. That's the subtitle of my book is Redefining Physician Leadership for Better Patient Outcomes. And to me, this is how you get individual physicians, if nothing else, to self-learn, but institutions to say, what's the linkage between better physician leadership and patient outcomes? And as you know, there's very good data across industries that show that the frontline leadership improves team performance, team member engagement, retention, error rates, environment of care, getting that link all the way down to, okay, my blood pressure is better is statistically very, very difficult, if not
Yeah.
impossible to do. But you just think if the patient feels like, hey, this is a really professional team, they really know what they're doing, everybody's on board, this is a great environment, I trust this doc, this team, this system, more likely to engage. There is some data that shows that as well.
At
And
all
that's
levels.
really what we're all about, right? And the
Right.
same, it goes back to all the way into the medical school. If you're looking at the curriculum, there's a ton of stuff that I refer to as leadership adjacent. There's communication skills and professionalism, and it's all sort of scattered about. It's disjointed. It doesn't build like we experienced at West Point from, okay, here's day one, and here's the vision of what you should be at year 4. And because it's disjointed and it doesn't really relate to taking better care of patients in the student learner's mind, then you prioritize anatomy and physiology and biochemistry because that's objective reality. When in reality, the subjective part is not only harder to learn, but more profoundly impactful on how you're going to be perceived and how effective you're going to be as a physician. I'm
Right.
convinced of that.
Right. And you ask any medical school, "Are you teaching your physicians to be leaders?" And they say, "Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you say, we're teaching communication skills." Alright, but it's not intentional,
Right.
right? And it has to be an intentional part of the curriculum. And the other big piece that's missing, and I someone asked me here recently, "What one thing would you change, in medical school education to get to more patient-centered, um, physicians who are educated in the mindset that they are leaders in their profession?" I would change the assessment. I would eliminate all scores from board scores because they're licensing exams for states to determine if someone's competent to be a physician in their state. They don't correlate well with performance in residency, but those scores are being used to determine who gets the best residencies. If we had an exam at the end of the third year of medical school that evaluated basic science knowledge, evaluated clinical science knowledge, and evaluated leadership science knowledge,
Yeah.
then the curricula would have to change because every medical student is focused on what do I need to learn so that I can get the residency that I want at the end of these 4 years. And if the assessment that helped determine that was an integral part of the system,
Yeah.
then we would really get somewhere. As it turns out, it's lip service right now
Yeah,
in many.
none of that is, the human context courses and the communication skills and the professionalism. Yeah, you gotta sit through those and you might, pencil whip a few essays. I'm being perhaps overly pejorative, but you're focused on those things because that's where, to paraphrase Willie Sutton, that's where the money is.
Right.
And human behavior drives toward the obvious goal of getting the residency you want where you want, and then going on from there. I use all true stories in the books and in my presentations on this, but I also have um, a fictional story that highlights some of the things that we've been talking about, where that self-awareness is so, so, so important, right? So I say, okay, I'm driving into the hospital and I'm late for clinic. Traffic was terrible. It's raining. And I get to the parking garage and my key card doesn't work. So I try it a couple times. Nobody's answering to open the gate for me. And now there's cars behind me, right? So I got to put it in reverse. They got to back up. I got to back up. Now I got to park in surface parking. I'm maybe in later. I didn't bring an umbrella because I parked in a garage. So now I'm walking in. I'm wet. I'm late. My badge doesn't work. I walk through the door and the clinic administrator's there and just says, "Hey, Dr. Moores, how you doing today?" And you just lose it, right? It's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm already late. Now I'm wet. I got this badge doesn't work. This is the third time this month." And then you go to your office door, right? So if you have zero self-awareness, you're just going to be upset, right? Sort of level one is thinking, "Oh gosh, I that wasn't right. I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to try to do better in the future." That's just like basic. I'm going to do better. Level two, I think, is I'm going to have to work with that administrator in the future. And so let me go back, apologize, give some idea of where my head was, not as an excuse, but as an explanation, and mend those fences. But then level three is he wasn't the only person that saw this, right? So the front desk staff, the nurses, patients maybe saw that. And that can have impact in ways that you don't even know.
Right.
Because like in our clinic, if you're more than 20 minutes late, you reschedule unless the doctor says, "No, no, no, don't worry, I'll see him." Well, somebody drives from West Virginia, 4-hour drive to see me. They're 25 minutes late. How likely after witnessing that do you think the front desk staff is going to be to come to me and say, "Hey, Dr. Moores, this patient's late"? They're not. So that patient gets sent out. I don't even know the negative impact multiplied by 10 people that little display had, if you're not self-aware, you're not going to get better,
Right.
you know?
And level 4 is being aware when he asks you how you're doing, that all those things are in play, and responding with, "Well, it's been a tough day, but let's figure out
Right.
how we can make it better,
That's right. That's
together."
the ultimate, right? You don't even
Right,
go there. Uh,
right.
yeah,
And
for sure.
I'll tell you, um, there's a lot of behaviors when I was in the military health setting where we'd have trainees, and I had no patience for them because I was so patient-centered that they were negatively impacting their training was negatively impacting, um, what I perceived as potential outcome, uh, challenges, whether it's a trainee that may be contaminating your surgical field, and you kick them out of the room. Well, what does that do to that trainee? What does that do to the team? Um, um, and and I think about how I am now and how you can learn to be a more effective, empathetic, self-aware, uh, self-controlled leader, because you've learned these skills on top of the leadership skills that you already had. It's phenomenal. I tell a story about being in clinic one day, and my nurse and I'm like you're talking about. It's been a rough day. I'm late. I'm behind. I'm 5 patients behind. I'm rushing to see the next patient, and I'm disregarding the advice of my mentors to always pause before you knock on the door, settle. I'm just going to barge in and get caught up. And my nurse tells me, "Dr. Taylor, can I talk to you for a second?" You know, if I hadn't been teaching healthcare leadership skills, um, and learned about self-awareness and learned about the importance of my team and creating that space where everyone feels comfortable, providing input, I would have said later, but I said, "No, yeah, tell what's going on." She said, "I want you to know before you go in there that the patient, Mrs. Jones, her mother just died. You'll see she has her photograph pinned to her blouse.
Mm,
You need to know that."
yeah, you do.
And so now I pause. I go in there. I talk to Ms. Jones about her mother for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
We tell her that, "Hey, we're going to take care of your shoulder when you come back and the time is right. But right now, the most important thing is to honor your mother." And I'm getting goosebumps telling the story.
I know. Yeah,
And
I'm not
let's take
tearing up
care
a
of
little
you.
bit. It's some peppers that I ate earlier.
But, that wasn't my emotional intelligence, that was the other part of this, the teamwork,
Yeah.
working on building the team, which expands your, awareness. It expands your EQ, because you've created a space where people can help you, uh, be more patient-centered and
Yeah.
be more aware and so that you can manage things in a way that's more appropriate, and that's how we get to real caring in patient care.
Yeah, just for fun one day, I looked around the OR and I had 2 circulating nurses, a tech, scrub tech, and a scrub tech trainee, an anesthesiologist, a CRNA, and a resident. And I did sort of a back of the envelope rough estimate that there were 113 years of OR experience in that room with that group. Crazy. So if you're brushing people off when they say, "Hey, I have some information that might be useful," you're shutting out an enormous wealth of knowledge that improves patient experience, patient safety, you name it. And it does start, like you said, with that self-awareness. And I look back, as you sort of hinted at, some of the things I said and did back then. how much, growth and maturity and comfort, right? I mean, there are very few cases now that get my heart rate and blood pressure up. It's been that way for a while, but early on, this is very stressful stuff that we do. And we would never take a 20-year-old right off the street and throw them in charge of an infantry squad in combat with life or death in line without years of training of how to lead in that stressful environment, how to effectively communicate when everything's flying, right? But we do that all the time with doctors, throw them into trauma bays, ICU codes, ORs, clinics, with effectively no learning in the fundamental theory and practice of leadership and how to lead under stress. My favorite example is some of us are old enough to remember Apollo 13, but certainly many, many people have seen the movie. But the ship's going through space, starts blowing up, imminent death for the entire crew. The commander, who is responsible for the crew, the mission, their lives, his own life, just disaster about to happen in all likelihood. And Lovell just, picks up the microphone. It says, "Houston, we have a problem." Right? I mean, that's how you want to be when there's bleeding you can hear in the OR. Take the temperature down. Everybody take a breath. We got this, which is not the norm, right? We talk about unwarranted variation in care, try to eliminate unwarranted variation in care. Well, this unwarranted variation in leadership skills and execution is huge. And some folks do it really well, some folks not so much. But narrowing that bell curve and then shifting it all to the right is, I think, a very honorable mission. So I'm glad you're on it.
Well, I'm glad you're on it too. I'm glad we're on it together. And there's some great people out there that are doing some really good things. And that's not to say that all care is not patient centered, or there's some great care being delivered, but it's not consistent
For
across the
sure.
board. And that's where I think we need to get. And I it's interesting as you were talking, I'm thinking that uh, we've had to learn things the hard way. I would like the next generation not to have to learn the hard way through experience. Um, uh, Let them learn so that they don't have as many experiences that they'd like to forget.
Yeah.
And I think the military is about 40 or 50 years ahead of us. My experience as a cadet at West Point, I'd like to forget. In fact, I've forgotten most of it because it was not pleasant. And I think at that point in time, it was a model where you put 1,500 people into a class, and I remember the first day they said, "Look to your left, look to your right. One of the three of you won't be here at the end," and that was true. We graduated 906 cadets. Um,
Yeah, we started with just over 1,600, graduated 962.
right, and so I think the military has learned that that is not an effective way to teach leadership, and I think having women at the academy moved the needle in a good direction. I think the experiences of Vietnam moved that needle, and I was, at West Point from 1995 to 2005, and then, have stayed connected, and you talk to cadets now, you say, "How you doing? Are you enjoying yourself?" They say, "This place is great. This is the best place. I'm learning so much." I would never have said that.
That's
I
right.
and uh, now they understand that West Point, now they enter 1,200, and it's not for everybody. They still graduate about the 900 and some cadets, but it's a leadership laboratory where the upper classes and the underclasses are learning to influence others, and they're learning from their mistakes, and it's intentional.
Yeah.
And that's where
It's
we
not
need to
just
be
a
in
haze
healthcare.
for 4 years. Yeah.
Right. That's where we need to be in healthcare. And
Agreed.
I think we can learn from that.
Well, and the cool thing is we know how to do this, right? We know how to teach. Now, a side note, I mean, one of the things that I'll say quite frequently is there are two things that all doctors do: lead and teach. And we get no formal education in either one, right? Adult education is a whole science, and we just assume that we can teach because we have a long white coat. We assume that we can lead. We don't even call it that. If you ask 100 doctors to name a healthcare leader, they're going to name a chief or a chair or dean or something like that. They're not going to say I am every day. But we know how to teach, generally speaking, and we're case-based learners. So, we go back to our honor code teachings when we were cadets. You looked at a case when we're teaching how to fix bones, how to fix brains. We look at cases, we learn from other mistakes, and we say, oh, okay, that's 2 standard deviations outside of where we need to be. I don't want to do that, so I will do differently. Teaching leadership's the same. These vignettes that we just talked about, our own personal experiences, show that to first and second year medical students, and they'll go, oh yeah, no, I can see why that would be a bad thing, and start programming the idea that, okay, this is how I do better in that stressful environment, because it's super stressful, time crunch, you're learning, you're under the gun to get patients taken care of. You always feel like the system is impeding your ability to get your patient down to the OR, or get your patient discharged or whatever. We're all subjected to that. EMRs, say the worst 3-letter word that any doctor can hear. And yet we do pretty well, right? Because, doctors are smart, hardworking, really care about their patients. So it's not like we're terrible. I'm not implying that at all, but just when you're starting from basically zero education and training, just some will move that needle.
Absolutely. And you think about how people are selected to go into medicine. Part of that is because they've demonstrated those leadership abilities. They've been the presidents of clubs, captains of athletic teams, and demonstrated that they can do that, and have taken educational offerings in their high school, undergraduate curricula that help them to learn to be more effective leaders. And then we put them in a leadership development vacuum for 4 years of medical school, and then however many years of
Yeah.
training they have after that, and we expect them to have those same skills at the end, when in many ways, the examples that we have in medicine are the same examples as we had of those upperclassmen hazing us when we were cadets.
Yeah. Yeah. The see one, do one, teach one leadership learning model, not the best, and it's like, oh, my chairman yells at everybody. My chief resident yells at everybody. So that must work. So I'm going to grow up like that
Right.
too. Yeah. Not, and, part of the problem is if you don't have some basis of knowledge of how to assess what you're seeing, right? And say, I know from my studies that that's not the most effective. And some of us are going to trip up all the time. It is
Absolutely.
stressful.
This
Got
is
it.
hard stuff. It's hard to
Really
learn. It's
hard
hard to do.
stuff. But without any fundamental knowledge of self-awareness, self-assessment, self-management, leading teams, you're not able to assess that. It's no different than if I said, okay, um, the 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 sodium's 145 and you have no idea what a normal sodium range is. It it has no meaning to you whatsoever. You don't know how to judge that, assess whether that's good or bad.
Right.
And without some formal, fundamental leadership training, you have no real knowledge of how to assess that
Right.
and decide who you want to model yourself after, you
Absolutely.
know.
Who are your main, leadership mentors?
Oh my gosh. My mom and dad,
Yeah.
no doubt about it. There've been a number of coaches throughout the years that, are tough, but you see why they're doing what they're doing. Um, Several neurosurgeons that I know, um, who are like, okay, under intense pressure, really, really, really do amazing things. My brother, I mentioned him um, as a leader. And if you go levels above that, um, Colin Powell, great
Mm.
example of someone
Yeah.
who just always seemed to, no matter how much stress, how much pressure, um, was doing the right thing, honorable, moral, appropriate. Um, I've always admired Condoleezza Rice. Um,
Yeah.
just stunning. I'm like, why aren't you running for president? I mean, there's a shameless plug. Uh,
Yeah.
Secretary Rice, please. Um, all kinds of things. So, how about you? What
Yeah, very similar
Coach
in
K? I mean, you
yeah, Coach
watch
K
his
definitely
style.
has
For me
been,
too.
yeah, somebody as an exemplar. My parents for sure, who, you know, uh, are amazing, and family. Uh, and I've been very fortunate like you to some people don't really have true mentors or, um, Maureen LaBeouf, who was a former head of the Department of Physical Education at West Point,
Oh wow.
said she never really had any mentors in the military, which I felt bad for because I think about in medicine and orthopedics, Bill Garrett and Jim Urbanek here at Duke, and uh, a name that any West Point graduate who has gone into medicine should know and uh, really be thankful that he paved the way for us is John Feagin, who was a West Point grad, class of '55, who went into the field artillery like you. He was an active duty soldier, and then um, was at Fort Bragg and met the dean of the med school at Duke, Dean Wilbur Davidson, at a keg party, and was
Can't
offered
not have
admission to
those.
the med school. Uh, and so John Feagin was the first West Point graduate to go to medical school on active duty. And I walked in his
Oh
footsteps
wow, I did not know
so many
that.
ways.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. He paved the way for all of the rest of us. And he was also team physician at West Point like I was. He came back to Duke on the faculty when I was a resident. Uh, Walked in his footsteps in so many ways, and that's he was the inspiration for and the reason we named our leadership program the Feagin Leadership Program was to honor him. And
Yeah, it's brilliant.
his mantra was do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And what a leadership mantra that is. And
Hard to argue with that, right?
he's still an inspiration, and his family is still very involved with our leadership programs, and having the annual forum and bringing all of the people that remember John Feagin and introducing him and his leadership example to future generations is a big reason why we put so much effort into the leadership program. So he
Yes.
was certainly uh, my biggest leadership mentor, especially in later years. And he died on September 1st of 2019, and we carry on that leadership legacy through the program.
Yeah. Well, he's keeping an eye on it.
Yes, he is. No
Great to
question
hear.
about it.
Great to
No
hear.
question about it.
So, if you think back over, say, the last 20 years of putting the programs together, biggest stumbling block, biggest obstacle, whether it's been overcome or not, what'd you learn from that or those one or two things?
Well, I've certainly made a lot of the mistakes, and
Mhm.
learn from 'em. The um, I think that's part of the reason why I think that the HLF, the Healthcare Leadership Foundation, is going to have such an impact because we're taking experiences of ours and yours and many others and and trying to help people that want to help physicians understand that they are leaders and give them the skills to lead well, and give them the ability to teach those skills without making the mistakes that we had to make. This is hard stuff, and we said it earlier, and it's not. If it's easy, everybody'd be doing it, right?
That's right. There'd be a booth at Sears, we used to say.
Right. It's hard stuff, and you're going to make mistakes all the time. And as long as you have a mindset that we're going to learn from those mistakes, you're going to get better. And so probably the things that I've learned is I didn't know as much as I thought I did, and to really embrace collaboration and working with others and learning from as many people as possible. And it may take longer, it may be harder to pull it all together, but by doing so, we're going to have a greater impact in the long term. And what we're doing now with the Healthcare Leadership Foundation is to build that foundation for the future generations to really tackle the challenges of creating the programs, the educational curricula, the entire educational environment where, to use your terms, every physician understands they are leaders, and we're teaching them the skills to be effective, ethical, patient-centered leaders. And whether you call it leadership or you call it um, patient-centered care in a way that's influencing others, you know, our language sometimes gets in the way. But I think if we do it together and we embrace other points of view and we do it with the idea that ultimately we want to change the education system so that we're technically proficient and we're patient-centered through our leadership, then we're going to change all of healthcare for the better and they'll tackle the challenges that will be there that we don't even know are coming.
Well, normally at this point, I would ask for a phenomenally persuasive closing statement, and you just made it. So completing the sentences, answering the questions before they're even asked.
Yes.
Professor Taylor, absolutely a pleasure. I look forward to lots of collaboration going forward. I'm sorry we haven't linked up before now, but we're young, right? We got 20, 30 more years of doing this, so I'm excited about it. So
Leon,
thanks for being on the show.
The beginning. What was it at the end of Casablanca? I believe this is the beginning of a wonderful partnership and relationship.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Thanks for what you're doing.
And thank you for all that you do.
This has been All Physicians Lead. We can all be better leaders, and our teammates and patients will be the beneficiaries. Go to allphysicianslead.com to unlock your potential, sharpen your impact, and elevate your journey. All Physicians Lead with Dr. Leon Morse is a production of Forbes Books.